The woman you see in this picture is my grandmother, Janice Mandeville. And that baby she's holding is me, about 18 and a half years ago. She lives in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, along with her husband, Paul Mandeville. My grandmother has been retired since 2003 after working for more than 20 years as a secretary at Potter Elementary School in Dartmouth. Now she spends her time reading, traveling, and babysitting her youngest grandchild, Cole.
I used to find Easter challenging because of the look.
Trot,
Kids' clothes a little rumpled.
and this is the way the gentleman drives. Trot.
But before I was born, before my grandparents even met, my grandmother's life was forever changed by the deaths of two of the most important people in her life, both of whom were taken by the water. I wanted to know more about this, more about my grandmother's life, so I interviewed her, making her the subject of this documentary. We decided it was best to start from the beginning, so we took a drive through the neighborhood where she grew up. Here, she remembered some of her fondest memories of her father.
And you can see the cement, like little wall on each side of the driveway.
Yeah.
Wall. He built that, and I can remember he was meticulous. It took him so long. He had to have it, this side. I guess he did the other side. I don't know. This side, and he was so meticulous. As kids, we came to the beach every day. We didn't realize how lucky we were. My grandparents had a house right on the ocean. It was just, that was how we grew up. It was the way it was. It was nice.
And then, tragedy struck, as her father went out on a fishing trip that would end up being his last.
My mother got out of the car, and she was so happy. She was like, "Oh, Georgie." And then I looked at her, and she yelled, and she kind of passed out. And he told her that my father was dead. And I got out of the car and was yelling, "What's the matter with my mother?" And somebody said, "Your father is dead." And I can remember sitting on the steps and crying, and my mother, she wouldn't, cry in front of us, but I would hear her crying at night. And so I was always very protective of my mother, and I wouldn't cry in front of her.
Although her father couldn't possibly be replaced, shortly after his death, they found someone who would become like a son to Julie, a brother to Russell, and eventually a husband to my grandmother.
When we were in 9th grade, he used to walk me home from school every day. And we would sit on my front steps and talk. And so he said, "Do you love me?" And I said, "Love you? I don't even know what love is." So he said, "Well, don't you love me?" And he kept saying it. And I kept saying, I can't tell you that I love you. That wouldn't be right. So he said, "Well, I'm not going home with you." And meanwhile, my mother's calling me to come in for supper, and he's saying, "I'm not going home." And so finally I said, "Okay, I love you. Bye, I have to go in the house."
After high school, both Janice and Teddy would go to college. Janice to a 2-year secretary school, and Teddy to a 4-year college to study chemistry. At the beginning of Teddy's senior year, the two were married. After college, Teddy got a job near Buffalo, New York. So the pair moved to the nearby Grand Island.
Actually, I was there not that long, and I was pregnant.
Janice gave birth to her first son, Timothy, on November 17th, 1966. Happily married with a newborn child, and finally starting to settle into a new environment, things were starting to look up. And then came the morning of April 22nd, 1967.
When they were building the dock, the raft got loose and, floated away. So he jumped in this kayak and went after the raft. And he got the raft, but the raft crashed into the kayak and made a hole in the kayak. So he had a choice. He was a very strong swimmer. He could get on the raft and go down the Niagara River over the falls, or he could swim for shore. There were icebergs still in the water, so you can see that it was very cold, and they said they saw him swimming and swimming and said, we better have some coffee for him, he's going to be cold. And then he disappeared. I can remember thinking one day, I should just go to the water and walk in. You know, I really don't think I want to live. And there were so many people that will love Timmy, you know, and take care of him. And it was that day or the next day that his body was found. So I didn't. I don't know whether I would have, you know, really.
Like her mother before her, she had become a widow. Fatherless at 13, widowed at the age of 23, both deaths as a result of the water.
I used to cry, sob, every single day. I would think to myself, I'll never get better. But every day that I was crying for him. I was thinking of everything he missed, how he should have lived, that he was a better person than I was, that he was smarter, that he was more outgoing, that he was friendlier, that all of these things. And why was I left here? I should have been the one to die, not him. And I would just feel terrible that he couldn't do all the things he had wanted to do. And then one day, a little over 2 years after he had died, I remember I was lying on the bed and I was crying and crying. And all of a sudden I sat up and I realized that I was crying for myself that day. I was crying for all the things that I didn't have. I was crying because I didn't have him, but I was crying for myself. And that, I remember that was a turning point for me. And so this girl that worked in the next office, who I had known before, one day she said to me, I really want you to meet this, my sister-in-law's brother. And I said, oh, Monica, I'm not dating anymore. I'm not going to date anymore, no.
The man whom my grandmother's friend was trying to set her up with was Paul Mandeville, and his reaction to going on a blind date was similar to my grandmother's.
I said no.
But eventually, they both gave in and went on the date.
So then we went back to my house and he came in and we sat for a long time. We were just talking and we really kind of hit it off.
Once again, Paul reacted similarly.
I fell in love right away.
The two would eventually marry and have 2 more children, one of whom is my mother, Amy. My grandparents have lived happily for over 42 years now. But during the first years of their marriage, my grandmother was continuously haunted by the memory of her first husband.
I had this dream, I don't know why, and I guess my mind was just ready or whatever happens to people. And I dreamt that he came to the door, the side door. That there was a knock on the door and I went and he was standing there. Now he never had a beard as long as I knew him, but he had a beard and mustache, and he said, I've come back for you. I was wrong to go away. And I remember I looked at him and I shook my head and I said, I'm not going with you. I said, I don't know where you've been or what you've been doing, but I'm not going with you. I'm married again and I have 2 more children and you're not a part of my life. And after that, the nightmares stopped.